Hi, it's Mrs. Huffcutt again with another chapter from our book, Miss Hickory. We're at chapter 6, and it's titled Barn News. Cow had been gone from the barn all day, and Mr. T. Willard Brown was anxious about her. Not on Cow's account. Oh no, he had only cupboard love for Cow and had missed his daily saucer of warm milk. As he sat beside a mouse hole in the barn, Mr. T. Willard Brown's mind wandered. He remembered the day last summer when Cow had been away also that time for a day and a night. There's a picture of Mr. T. Willard Brown by his mouse hole. It had been a day last summer when anyone could have wished to be away from the barn. The three brooks that flowed through the old place's acres and emptied into the pond had been gurgling all the tunes that they knew. Young corn was bursting into ears. Baby birds were trying their wings over the sunny grass of high mowing. Cows seldom gave heed to the beauties of nature, but that day she had a strong urge to get away from stalls and milking pails. She had stepped slowly over the barn threshold and taken her way heavily down the road, past high mowing and then along First Brook into the woods. She had drunk deeply of the sweet, cool water. Then, where some young white birches made a sheltered spinney carpeted with moss and dimly secret, Cow had lain down. That was a luxury which she seldom allowed herself. There in the hidden spinney, Cow had rested, her big heart warm. The morning of the second day, Mr. T. Willard Brown could endure his thirst no longer. He had started out to find Cow. No one in the barn seemed to share his concern about Cow, so he traveled alone. He had crept through the tall grasses of Acre Piece, followed the stone wall that marked high mowing, and then, fancying that his nose scented milk, he trailed into the woods. There, still resting on the velvet moss of the birch spinney, Mr. T. Willard Brown had found Cow. But Cow was not alone. On either side of her great brown haunches lay a young heifer. Cow turned from side to side, her brown eyes full of love, licking first one small soft daughter with her rough tongue, then licking the other. Two newborn heifers! Mr. T. Willard Brown stopped dead in his tracks. Twins! That was unusual. No cow in all Hillsboro had ever given birth to twins. As he looked at the twin heifers, mottled brown like Cow, their eyes as white and hazel as hers, the three saw him. Cow arose lumberingly. The heifers, too, found their spindly legs would hold them, and they stood leaning against their mother. This way, Mr. T. Willard Brown told them. Waving his long tail that quivered with excitement even to its white tip, he led Cow and twin heifers out of the woods and toward the barn. Now in November, twin heifers were able to take care of themselves. Their big eyes were as dark as Third Brook when brown oak leaves floated on the surface. Their brindled coats were still soft, but the hair had grown thicker for winter warmth. Their slender legs were strong, but the twins, to the surprise of Cow and the entire barn as well, were alike only in appearance. In their manners and tastes they could hardly have been recognized as sisters. Barn heifer was home-loving, sober, and polite. She knew that she belonged in the barn, that the barnyard was her front yard, and that she should come into supper promptly. Her bedtime found her in the soft straw of Cow's stall, and the crooning of the hens on their perches sang her to sleep. But not her sister. Ah, no! There were forest strains in Wild Heifer's blood. She felt choked by the barn walls. Tied to a post in the barnyard, Wild Heifer pulled it up and was off, dragging post and rope behind her. She often missed her supper, seeming to thrive on stubble and gleanings. She was sometimes out all night. Wild Heifer was gone from the barn that day, and Mr. T. Willard Brown finally left his mouse hole and crossed the flooring stealthily. He would, he decided, hide behind the open door and find out when Wild Heifer came home. When Cow, who was probably out hunting for her wandering daughter, returned, Mr. T. Willard Brown would tattle. But even he, used to the ways of the country and not easily shocked, felt his neck hairs rising, his tail becoming large as towards evening he saw Cow coming down the road. Ever since the birth of twin heifers, Cow had felt herself superior. She had felt that even giving the usual amount of milk was not necessary. Her picture, together with that of her daughters, had been in the Hillsboro News with a printed piece about them. Cow had decided that now her time had come for a life of pleasure. As Cow would have put it, she could rest on her laurels, and this in fact was just what Cow had been doing that day, resting among laurel bushes and stuffing herself with windfall apples where a pile of them had been dumped under the lee of Temple Mountain. But first, as she had started out on her ventures that morning, Cow had stopped in the truck garden and eaten a whole winter squash. It was an acorn squash with a hard green shell and richly yellow inside. She had eaten acorn squash shell and all. And then on a morning breeze, Cow had got a whiff of the rotting apples. It had been beyond her power to resist. When she'd eaten more of the apples than was wise, Cow had arisen with difficulty from her bed of laurel, staggered down to the road, and started home. And there's a picture of her. Mr. T. Willard Brown's tail had reason to become large at the sight of Cow. She had lost all sense of respectability. She was not walking, but jigging her way home, doing a poor kind of tap dance from one side of the road to the other, past the acre piece, by high mowing, trying at last to get through the barnyard gate. She felt that it had been a successful day. As she came capering along, Cow gave deep-throated moos of satisfaction. One could understand from Cow's behavior, Mr. T. Willard Brown thought, how wild Heifer had come by her wildness. He ran out to the gate to point out the gate post between which Cow must enter. She made it, but inside the barn she collapsed. As happens often when one eats too much, Cow had a tremendous stomach ache. Her moos changed from hilarity to calls for help. Mr. T. Willard Brown ran mewing for the farmer. Cow needed medicine, and as he had seen her being dosed in the past, he knew how exciting the sight would be. She looks kind of miserable there. If Cow had been able to swallow in a civilized way like the horses and the sheep, her medicine would have gone down easily. But since Cow ordinarily lived on cuds, chewing them for long periods of time, and had a special digestive system, she swallowed differently from most animals. She had to be stood on her back legs against the side of her stall, which was an uncomfortable and undignified stance to have a dose of medicine poured down her throat. As the farmer started towards the barn with a bottle, Mr. T. Willard Brown decided to let Miss Hickory see the performance. Although he had heard where she was living, he had not as yet called upon her. He remembered her sharp remarks just before she had moved, but he was not a man to treasure his hurt feelings. So Mr. T. Willard Brown raced up to the orchard along Mackintosh Lane and climbed the tree where Miss Hickory had her nest. Miss Hickory had gone to bed early. She liked to lie snug and warm as she watched the setting sun turn the leaves on the mountainside into a curtain of jewels. Then in an apple-green sky, cold and cloudless, the sun would set. Miss Hickory would pull her head down as far as she could and say a little prayer, asking that she might find her head still on when she awoke. So it was not surprising that she was terrified to see Mr. T. Willard Brown's eyes, like headlights, peering at her over the rim of her nest. "Come over with me to the barn, Miss Hickory," Mr. T. Willard Brown purred. "Cow is going to be given medicine. She has a stomach ache." "Is that all you have to say for yourself? Must you rouse me from my beauty sleep with such a poor excuse? What is it that you really want to be?" "Only to give you a few moments of entertainment," he said sadly. "You'll be sorry if you do not come over, Miss Hickory. This is going to be good." He climbed down the tree, peering back through the branches. "You have probably not heard the barn news. One of Cow's twins has turned out badly. She runs away. You would best watch your step, Miss Hickory. Wild Heifer is often in the orchard and might easily mistake you for a little green bush with red berries. Do you want to be eaten, Miss Hickory?" That, he felt, was a proper retort. He padded home as fast as he could, but Miss Hickory did not move. And that's the end of chapter 6.